That was awesome. All right, time for a little unboxing here. We got some stuff in from Caddy Daddy, and pretty famous Cadillac distributor around the country. And that's a flyer they sent me there in the mailbox. We got inner and outer tie rods. I tell you what, I opened the inner tie rod box already. And where did I put the stuff? Here it is over here. The labels were torn off. I'm not sure why. I tossed the box already. But I talked to the sales guy. He said they manufactured these in-house. I don't know where they manufacture them. Couldn't tell you. But these inner tie rods look good. I pulled them out of the package here, and I don't see anything wrong with them. The only thing wrong with it is it didn't come with a cotter pin, and it didn't come with the Alamite to grease it. So I guess I'll take the Alamite off of the old tie rod, and I believe I have a package of cotter pins laying around here somewhere that I can use. So these are the inners. On the Cadillac, the inner tie rod is a lot longer than the outer. Not sure why. That's just the way they did it. Hey, look at that. I guess the inner tie rod box not providing these two little parts was a mistake. I'll have to make sure and email the sales guy and let him know. I would say that the quality is excellent. This shaft right here is it's refined. It's extremely smooth. They put some time into that, and I don't know. It's a good looking product. It's fine. Now as to how long the ball joint inside it will hold up, then well, we'll see what happens, I guess. All right, we'll set these aside. My parts list keeps getting bigger and bigger because I haven't installed anything, actually. I've just been tearing stuff down. And this is probably going to be the control arm shafts. Oh, okay, no, these are the inner liners for the fender well. Apparently the control arm shafts have not shipped, and I'm going to need to, I just made an assumption that that's what this was. I guess I should have known that Caddy Daddy didn't put a label on the outside of the box. So you ever notice that everything nowadays has a California cancer warning on it? I'm like, okay, fine. If you're going to say everything that makes cancer, you know, that's give me strength. These are fantastic looking, actually. Looks like it's made really well. Holy cow, these are, man, these are nice. They're nice and pliable, and it looks like, I don't know if I had to describe it, that material they put on those, you know, the running track at a high school or a junior college or something, and the track's got that rubbery surface on it. I don't know, it reminds me of that. It's probably a different material, but it reminds me of that. I don't know. But okay, I'm not going to undo these right now, because this is like the last step in the project. So we're going to set these in the box and let's move on. All right, here we are on the passenger side, and I was getting ready to remove the upper dust shield like there was on the driver's side, and I began to notice that there isn't one. Now, if I went back and looked in my records and discussion from the previous owner, and he did note that this fender had been repainted at some point in the car's life. I don't know if it's a new fender or if maybe it had some damage, or maybe it just scratched. I really don't know. If you look in here, there's no signs of any staples like there was on the driver's side. Now, whether or not the staples are stock or new or original to the car, I have no idea. I think this fender was probably off the car, because there's no sign that a cover was ever attached over here at all. So they probably just neglected to reinstall it. So that being said, looks like we had a little bit of rubbing right here. And this cover will get replaced as well. So up next, I'm going to go ahead and take that off. And then after that's done, I'm going to start cleaning up this area like I did on the driver's side. And I don't think this side is quite so bad, really. I still got a lot of undercoating right here, so I may not touch that at all. I may just scuff it and paint it. I don't think this side is that bad at all. So I think most of the rust is up here on the spring housing. And we've got a little bit up here, but really, it's really nothing to write home to. I'll probably just scuff that up a little bit here and there, and I will treat it with the metal prep. Then we'll top coat it with the Duplicolor gloss black. So I think the cleanup on this side will be a lot quicker than the driver's side. All right, our upper control arms have been soaking long enough, I think. I flipped these around. Those came out really good. I'm going to let the threaded end soak for a while next. There we go. Come on out of there. Now, I actually pulled these out earlier this morning. Got them cleaned up with the pressure washer, and so that's the reason why they're so clean. Once the rust is converted, it just comes off so easily. But these upper control arms, man, they were pretty bad. So I decided to leave them in there a little while longer. So I'm going to take these out and hit them again with a pressure washer, and then we'll prime them and paint them up. All right, pardon all the fans. I'm drying off all the water from washing everything away. I've got the metal prep on here for about 30 minutes, and we've already washed it all off, and we got our nice gray coating. And we're going to let this dry for a good long while, make sure it's really dry, and then we'll come back in here with the self-etching primer. This side wasn't quite as bad as the driver's side, but after I got all the grease off of it, I began to notice that, yeah, it wasn't great, that's for sure. Tell you one thing, man, that's a nice car. I'll tell you one thing, that Duplicolor is going to get a nasty gram from me. I'm going to tell you what, these rascals are they need to straighten up. I got one can that wouldn't spray, took it back. Another can that would barely sprayed. I was able to get it out of the can, and it just made a mess of the work. This can here sprays good, sprays like it's supposed to. This can right here, you press that button and it's like turning on a water hose. I have never seen a can of spray paint shoot out that much paint in all my born days. This one's defective as well. You got to stand 5 feet away from it to spray it. It's ridiculous. All right, I've had my say. Duplicolor, get yourself straight. And you folks that are watching this video, you know anybody that works at this company? Tell them what I'm saying. All right, we've got our passenger side all cleaned up and painted. And of course, as you know, the rubber covers will be covering up these areas here with the new paint, so you won't see that stuff anyway. It'll cover this up as well. And on this side, we have our battery ground, which is connected right there. Not too shabby. I think after we get this oil pan cleaned up and get that all addressed, I think the bottom of this car will really pop. Not that anybody's going to be staring at it but me, but hey, at least I'll know it's good. All right, folks, let's begin reassembling the front end on our Coupe Deville. We're going to start with the upper control arms. From Caddy Daddy, I purchased new control arm shafts, and they came with the bushings, the lock nut, and the washers, and then we have 2 of each clearly. So according to the book, we are going to install an installer tool here on this end, one on this end, basically just a pipe that fits the bushing perfectly. And then we're going to use a spacer between either end of the control arm to keep the control arm from compressing this way. They have like a half pipe here, but I'm just going to use a piece of angle iron that I cut to length already. It's at 11.5 inches. And I have 2 pieces of pipe here and here. And these, and the pipe needs to fit around the rubber part but sit there on the lip of the bushing, thus so, in that manner. So, all right, I think you catch the drift there. Let me get all of this stuff together over at the press, and we'll go ahead and get these bushings installed in the upper control arms. All right, we're getting ready to put this upper control arm back together here. You don't want to just arbitrarily put the control arm shaft back in there, because once you do, it'll be tight, right? So there is an angle that the service manual wants you to use, and it is 14 degrees. In other words, the straight lines here denote the flat part of the control arm shaft. So what you're going to do is angle this at 14 from the center line here of the control arm, and that looks sort of like that, right? So the lower part of the control arm here lines up with the I guess you'd call it the x-axis there, right? And that will intersect in the center of that hole, and we'll simply twist this and get it exactly 14 degrees. Yeah, that'll happen. So I was trying to find my little angle thing that I use for crown molding, but I can't locate it. So I'm going to do a little trigonometry here with my speed square and come up with the appropriate angle. All right, so one thing I noticed here about the control arm shaft, it looks like they've got a line right there on the end of the control arm shaft, and so that you can get your angle just right before you press the bushings in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my speed square. How do you use this thing again? Goodness gracious. There we go. Degrees. So there's your 5-degree mark right there. 0 point is back here, and then a line from there to there is 5 degrees, and then we're going to go to 14, which is right there. So let's make a mark. All right, that's our target right there. It's our 14-degree mark. All right, call me crazy, but hey, you know what? Whatever works. So I got a little piece of wood and some cardboard there. Wanted to get the 0 coordinate mark here on the speed square close to the center of the control shaft as I possibly could, and I believe I've done that. Went ahead and made myself a line right there, so I can take the line of the control shaft and line it up with the black line here on the speed square. So I'm going to sit here and piddle with this for a minute or two and see if we can't eyeball that. You know, just eyeball that and get it about where we think it ought to be. And then what I'm going to do is I'll punch me a little mark down here on the control arm shaft that lines up with the line on the end of this thing. That way we know we have the correct orientation. And then what I'll do is here on the bench, I think what I'll do is I'll try to tap this thing into place and see if we can't tighten it up just a little bit, and then take it over to the press and finish the job. And the reason this angle is important, it's really about the longevity of the bushings, right? Because the bushings are going to be tight, and they're going to be twisting like that. The rubber is going to be twisting back and forth like that. So if they're not quite right, if this angle here is not quite right when you mount this thing on the car, you're going to be taking these bushings and you're going to be twisting them too far, and they'll rip. They'll just rip apart. So this needs to be correct, or, you know, in the reasonable ballpark. All right, so I've got a piece of angle iron here. We're going to use this as our reinforcement. I just want to make sure this thing is straight up and down, really. And I think what we're dealing with is my the lack of squareness of the pipes that I cut for this job. So, like my press is square, right? So I don't think it's going to matter a whole lot, folks, anyway, because this is just not that much force. Getting them out of there is one thing, but I think putting them in, it won't be that bad, really. Yeah, it's going in really easy. Well, not easy, but you get the point. guess that we're probably done. Yeah, I think we're done. That was awesome. All right, we got our bushings pressed in there all the way on both sides, all the way around. Looks good. And we have our, let's double check our angle here. So I have this little line here between the two little marks that I made. And it is lined up between the two little marks. So, all right, let's move on. I'll go ahead and install the control arm shaft on the other upper control arm off camera. All right, we got the control shafts in both upper control arms. Getting ready to put the ball joints in. Pretty simple, really. This Movitech upper ball joint MS50547 is for the front right or passenger side. And this is the passenger side upper control arm. That doesn't matter. It only matters because I put a P there and I wanted the same one to go back on the same side of the car. Anyway, so these two flanges here, they clearly fit into this recess here. If you flipped it around the other way, it simply wouldn't work. And since this is the one that goes on the passenger side, the open part of the ball joint goes toward the back of the car, and the closed off part goes toward the front of the car. If you look at the other ball joint, it's exactly the opposite. And the way these repair ball joints work is they're threaded, and you got this ring, this threaded ring, and you got some holes right here. There's probably a special tool that goes into tightening this up. I'm not sure if I have it or not. If I don't, I'm just going to use a hammer and a punch to tighten up this ball joint. And then of course the dust boot will go over the top of that. It has a metal ring right here that seals around this ring, and of course lastly you have the nut, and of course the box also comes with a cotter pin and an Alamite to grease the ball joint. All right, we got the upper ball joint in there, tapped it in place a little bit, used a punch and a hammer to tighten up the ring until the travel was bottomed out, and we slipped the dust cover over it, and that's got a metal ring, and it's got a fairly tight fit. So you slip it down on there, and just a real easy tap around the edge will fully seat that down around there. And of course your eccentric goes on next. This is how you adjust your alignment, and the hex head here goes towards the rubber, and then you have this little oblong looking washer type deal followed up with the castle nut. I also need to install the grease fitting there. I'm going to go ahead and reassemble the other control arm off camera, and then we'll get these upper control arms on the car. All right, I broke the first lower control arm bushing because I simply had a pipe placed around this outside flange. I thought it wouldn't take that much force to insert it. I was wrong, so I broke the flange off, got another one on order. So I'm going about this a different way. We have the tool that we made at the beginning of this video series placed underneath here to serve as our receiver cup. We have our other custom-made tool placed between the control arm flanges to keep it from compressing as we press the new bushing into place. And I'm using one of the bolts that came out of the suspension. It's really large. It's like a little over ½ an inch. It slips down into the bushing hole there, and I've got it placed into a piece of 1/4 inch steel here, and I drilled a hole through that. So, and I'm simply going to press on the bolt, and that's going to press on that, and it's going to be just right. So cross your fingers. Let's see how this goes. And the rubber is compressing, which I expected it to do. All right, with some silicone around that thing and using a longer bar, it seems to be going in. All right, I think we're finally successful there. The wetness is the silicone lubricant that I used, so I think that was a must for this job. This lower control arm bushing is a really, really tight fit. All right, up next we're going to press in the lower control arm ball joint, and got it started by hand right there just to check the fitment. And of course we have our bushing already installed. So I modified one of the tools that I made in a previous video. I just basically bored about a 1 inch hole there in the end of that thing, so that we got our plates here, and set the hole over the hole in the plates clearly. And we'll take the control arm with the ball joint there, and we'll set it right down in there, and the hole will give room for the ball joint shaft to go through like that, so we can fully depress the ball joint into the control arm. And then we're going to use this, I robbed this from a cheap ball joint tool I've had for years, which I never used, and it will fit across the ball joint just perfectly like that, so that will work out well. And I'll take another flat piece of steel, 1/4 inch or something, and I'll place it on top of there, and we'll get all of that into the press, and we'll install our ball joint. Alright, that's what that looks like. Got an old piece of steel from an old junk railroad, and old piece of pipe, custom tool with a hole cut in it. Got our arbor plates there, and with the indention open for the ball joint shaft to protrude through. And this should Alright, we're all the way down. Let me take all this mess out of here. Alright, this is that TRW branded lower ball joint that I got off of eBay. And good part, made in USA. New old stock, but it didn't come with a castle nut. It got lost or something. Went to the parts house and bought a new castle nut. It did come with the grease fitting and the cotter pin, however, and of course the boot. Alright, we're going to put the dust boot on next. There is a gap right here, and there's some verbiage on here that says put this towards the inboard of the car. I'm assuming this is the gap for the grease to ooze out whenever you grease your ball joints, and that will make the grease ooze out this way and not towards the brakes. So I've got that positioned on there. This lip is basically got a steel ring in it, and it needs to be tapped on or forced on around the ball joint. So we're going to use this old piece here again, and it fits over that actually perfectly, coincidentally. And then we have this tool we made. We punched a hole in it, and that will go over that around the ball joint shaft, and I'll take a big hammer and tap that down and seat the boot around the ball joint. Alright, let me tell you something. If you think you're going to seat this boot around that ball joint by hand, not going to happen. I had to use quite a bit of force with this setup, so that's just a handy tip for you if you're installing this kind of ball joint and putting the boot over that. So you know what, there probably is a better way to do it than what I'm doing it, but I just made it up on the fly. So if you know of a better way, hey, put the comment down below and let everybody know. Maybe I could have pressed the ball joint in and installed the boot simultaneously if I had all of the proper tools, but this is a really old car, and you know what are the proper tools, right? So all right, let's move on. Let's get this thing back on the car. All right, we got the upper control arms installed on the car. I've got the bolts tightened down to 85 foot-pounds. Got our grease fitting in there, and got everything in place loosely, including these nuts here on either side. Those will get torqued down after we get the car lowered onto the ground and the suspension travel is normalized. Once the car is on the ground and the spring is in, then we'll tighten up those two nuts on either end. Same goes for the lower control arm. Once we get the spring in and the spindle in, we get the tire back on, and we get the car on the ground, we'll tighten up this nut at that time. But for right now, it just needs to be loose, because after you tighten all that stuff up, you're going to compress the rubber. The rubber's travel needs to be, this much. If you tighten it up here, you'll basically just break the rubber if you try to bring that up. As we prepare to put the spindle back on the car, we're going to use some standard nuts when we put this ball joint into the steering knuckle. And I've got a standard nut for that, a 9/16 by 18 thread, and a 1/2 by 20 standard nut for this one. So you'll use the standard nut to tighten the ball joints into the steering knuckle, and then you'll remove it, and then you'll install the castle nut afterwards. So up next, I'm going to finish painting the steering knuckle. All right, welcome back to the mobile paint booth. Disregard the air conditioner noise. It is the summertime after all. So, well, we just got through with a wire wheel. Well, first we degreased them with some super clean, then we pressure washed them, and then we wire wheeled them. And now I'm going to do some self-etching primer. I'm going to follow that up with some engine enamel gloss black, and they'll look brand new when we're all done. All right, let's go ahead and get our steering knuckle in place. We've got the eccentric placed in there and somewhat the original location. Oh, let's see, how do I do this? That's got to be upside down. Trying to get it back in there the way it was. So there we go. All right. There we go. All right. The eccentric goes on the top, and then we've got that oblong washer beneath that, and we've got a standard nut and a standard washer. And we'll tighten this up. All right, so the idea here is to tighten up this standard nut against the flat washer there, basically until the eccentric seats into the steering knuckle assembly. Once that's done, you're going to remove this, install the castle nut, and tighten it down to 60 foot-pounds. So I'm not sure what seat means according to the book, but pretty doggone tight, so when you take that nut back off, it won't fall off. Actually, I don't have to take that off just yet. I can leave that like that, and then go ahead and bring the lower control arm up and tighten it up, and once that's done, then we can take this regular nut off and put the castle nut off. We'll do it like that. Starting to come together, isn't it? All right, we got to, I got a spring compressor on this thing right next to my head where it's nice and safe, so that's always good. Pow! He was an excellent DIY home mechanic until one day the spring compressor shot through his skull. Okay, I've got a jack, just like that chick in the AC/DC song, but it's different. So basically, I've got to get the spring nestled in its housing up there. So the distance between that and this ridge on this lower control arm is shorter than the uncompressed length of the spring, which is brilliant. So that means, unless you're Arnold Schwarzenegger or somebody, you know, I'm not gonna manhandle that in there. So I've got to have a spring compressor in here, and it's got to be compressed like about three-quarters of an inch or an inch or something like that. So I've got it under tension, not a huge amount. It's not crazy, but enough to get it into position. So let's get this jack over here, and I've already positioned this thing in here once, so I know it'll slip in there. Question is, will it slip in there on camera? I don't know. Let's see here. There we go. That's what I wanted right there. Now you don't you even think about doing what I'm thinking you're doing, wanting to do. Now, what we're going to do is come back here with the old leg. See that? Got my leg back there. All right, now I'm going to get out from underneath this death trap. That was a little hairy, but I think we got her done. Now I've got to lift the jack up, and at some point during this process, I can get underneath there and remove that spring compressor. Let's just jack it in the air and see what happens. I'll be quiet now. That's right, settle on in there, buddy. All right, service manual says to put a standard nut on there. And what I'm going to do is torque this nut down, and then I'm going to loosen the spring compressor. and then we'll carry on. All right, I made a mistake. That spring compressor, and I should have remembered this, but I didn't. That spring compressor is too large to fit into that spring when it is in a compressed state. So when I tried to remove it after I had already tightened this, I couldn't get it out. So I had to take the nut, I had to take the regular nut back off, lower it down, and then take the spring compressor out. And now I'm going to jack it back up and reattach the lower ball joint to the steering knuckle. Not a huge deal, but it is a procedural thing that you will need to know. All right, so where does that leave us? What do we got going on here? I can't tighten this down to the proper torque setting because this thing basically, well, it still moves a little bit, so that'll just be really annoying. So what I think I'll do is I'll get the tie rods back in place. After that is done, I will remove these standard nuts and I will torque the castle nuts to the proper setting. I got the rubber bump stop there. Still need to reinstall the rubber bump stop here. I need to put in the strut rods that go from here back to here. We got a lot of stuff to do yet, so let's just press on, shall we? So this is what it feels like with a detached tread on the front of your automobile. And I think it's getting worse. All right, we've got the standard castle nuts on both the lower and the upper control arms finally. And I've got these, all these ball joints greased up as well, upper and lower, and on the tie rod. And I've got the tie rod installed clearly, the new one. The longer part goes towards the inside of the car, by the way. I've got these torqued down as well, cotter pins installed, and so on and so forth. And they are greased up, as you can tell. So coming together. So I think at this point, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the other steering knuckle for the passenger side and get that painted up and get that installed off camera. Do that off camera. And just sort of do both sides kind of simultaneously. And then after I'm done with that, I'll pick back up here with the driver's side. We'll go ahead and get the strut rod installed with its bushing kits as well. Get the shock installed. We need to rebuild the brake calipers. I manufactured a new brake line. Get that installed. Anyway, we've got a lot of stuff to do, so we're going to carry on. So we'll be right back. Well, it appears we've reached a stopping point for this weekend's video activity. We have successfully reinstalled the upper and lower control arms on both sides of our Coupe Deville, along with the inner and outer tie rods. These were replaced. They were obtained from Caddy Daddy. Got these torqued down. 60 foot-pounds on the inside, 37 on the outside. Not sure how they determined that, but oh well. These adjusters are 20. I don't know why I bothered tightening them down. The alignment's probably wildly out of whack. So they'll just have to loosen all that stuff anyway at the alignment shop whenever I drive it down there. I kept some plastic and some stuff over the spindles with some grease in there while I was doing all the washing and everything to keep the water away, and got a coat of grease on there to keep the rust away from that. So before we get ready to put the disc back on, we'll clean that up. Maybe run a little 1500 grit paper around this just to clean up that spindle just a little bit and get some of the wear marks out of it. It doesn't have any grooves or anything. It feels pretty nice, but we'll just clean it up just a touch. Getting these springs back in this car is kind of tricky, so we've already gone over that. The lower control arm pivot bolt is not tight. There's no need for that yet. We won't tighten that bolt down until we get the car on the ground. It'll be tighten that to 90 foot-pounds. These nuts up here for the upper control arm are loose as well. Again, we'll tighten all that stuff after we get the car on the ground. So I've gone ahead and greased up my upper and lower ball joints and my tie rods on both sides of the car. And here's the driver's side. As you can see, everything's buttoned up and it's looking pretty good. So the things that we have left clearly are the strut rods, the sway bar that goes from side to side, and the sway bar end links. Brake caliper rebuilds. We're going to do that. We're going to rebuild the brake calipers. Pardon my messy bench. We're also going to pull the bearings out of these discs and simply do an inspection. I think they're fine, but we'll probably just take them out, clean them up, get all the old grease out, and then just repack them just for good measure. And the brake pads are fine as well. I think maybe just some brake clean on those and they'll be fine. But the brake calipers are 50 years old as far as I know, so I think I'm going to go ahead and rebuild those. I've got rebuild kits for the calipers. We're about 85 to 90% there, folks, on finishing up the front end on this old Coupe Deville. But I think I'm going to call this a video. It's been kind of a long one for me, so I tell you what, I appreciate you guys stopping by the channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified whenever I release a new video, don't forget to click that little bell down there. You know where it is. It really does help my channel out a lot when you press the like button and subscribe and share. So if you do that for me, I would really appreciate it. You guys have a good one, and remember to enjoy driving your classic Cadillac.